untold centuries. Can you hear me? Good morning.
Good morning.
For untold centuries, people have drawn apart from the workday world to celebrate, to worship, and to wonder at things beyond and within themselves. So we are gathered here on this day to raise our sights and look at new horizons. Life is more than toil for bread. Life is more than just enduring a pandemic. Life has meaning and purpose. As we celebrate our life together, let us seek harmony within ourselves, with one another, and the world, and find our lives uplifted and made a little bit better. May it be so. Good morning. Good morning to you all. I'm Jeff Barz-Snell on behalf of the Reverend Sarah Napoleon and myself, Jeff Weeding and Bill Sano and our staff. We are delighted to have you here with us this day in our ad hoc sanctuary yet again. I don't know what people are complaining about. It's not too cold out. Well, at least not yet. We have warm cider to help us after the service. This is our last official outdoor service of this year, of this season. It is a Halloween, All Hallows Eve theme, and I'm delighted to see so many of you taking that challenge on in earnest. Since the cameras are pointed towards me, let me just for the record note that we have vampires and Oreo cookies and people from Los Angeles? I'm not even sure. And yes, and Elvis. Elvis is in the house. And a witch. And and a clown. A clown in the back. Clown's kind of clownish, no? Anyway, we're delighted to have all of you here this day. People have asked if I am wearing a costume. I will be donning a costume during the Harvest Fair and Fellowship Hour, rest assured. I think that's it for right now. Would you all please rise up as you are able? It's good to stand up. I just want to make sure that everyone took the opportunity to sign in and Purell at the skeleton table over in the parking lot as well. But please join with me in singing 3 verses of When Morning Gilds the Skies. Choose to bless the world.
as he blessed the world is more than an act of will, a moving forward into the world with the intention to do good.
It is an act of recognition, a confession of surprise. It is a grateful acknowledgement that in the midst of a broken world, unspeakable beauty, grace, and mystery abide.
There is an embrace of kindness that accompanies all life, including ours.
None of us alone can save the world.
Together, that is another possibility, waiting.
The peace of God be with you.
Also with you.
Let us take a moment and greet one another from a socially distanced position in peace.
I have.
Oh, you do? Peace and all the other good stuff.
Please be seated.
I invite you to join me in the spirit of prayer, printed in your order of service. God of mystery and love, who subtly lives amidst our lives in moments of insight and inspiration, as we gather this day under a dome of leaves and blue sky, we give thanks for the bonds we share with nature, with this community, and with you. In the days ahead, may we work to make the world a better and more peaceful place. Inspire us to be our best selves, even as we know that we often fall short of our hopes and expectations. May we, as people of faith, be granted the courage to be bold, active, and loving. This we ask in the Spirit of Jesus Christ, who taught us to pray using, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. And now, Jim Dana will come forward to light our chalice. And Kathy.
When we light this chalice, we are recognizing our diversity as people, but our sameness as souls, trying to serve what is holy and decent in this world. Today we light this chalice in recognition and celebration of those who make communities like ours more welcoming and more diverse. We want to acknowledge and celebrate the announcement by Pope Francis that he supports giving legal status to same-sex couples and making gay Catholics more welcome in the church. And we want to acknowledge and celebrate our own steps towards becoming a more welcoming congregation. May everyone, regardless of their faith journey, feel welcome here. We therefore light the flame of knowledge. May understanding be with us. We light the flame of love. May caring be among us. We light the flame of holiness. May the unifying Spirit be within us.
Thank you. Thank you, Jim and Kathy.
Good morning, one and all. It is very good to be with you. And today, as our bell chimes and tells us of the passing of time, I want to speak with you about the passing of time on a broader scale, about the way things change in our world. And I want to tell you about the journey of the earth, the journey that we are on, whether we are recognizing it or not, a journey that is embedded in pagan and Wiccan and earth-based traditions and is actually at the root of much of our Christian traditions and Unitarian Universalist traditions as well. The cycle of the year begins next week, or this week, with October 31st, Samhain. It's a pagan harvest festival and also known as Halloween. It is a time of the year when the great God of the world dies. The sun dies. But at the same time, it is the start of new life. The great goddess, the partner and balance to the god, is pregnant with the birth and preparation for the new God to be born again. And this is also a time of the year when the veil is thin, when spirits roam the earth, when things are not quite as apart and distant as we may seem or feel. And so the harvest continues, and the year dies, and the wheel turns to Yule in December 21st, the winter solstice, the shortest day of the year where the sun is not with us much. And the Great Mother, in that moment, gives birth to the god, to the sun god. And in that time, that's when we are celebrating the perseverance of life with evergreens and Christmas trees, when we witness the bringing of the sun back to life, and we celebrate the return of warmth, it will be here, and the return of the sun. And then the year continues, and we then come to February 2nd, Imbolc, which actually means in milk, and it is the time of the year, believe it or not, the coldest, darkest, dreariest, sludgiest time, when the milk comes in for cows and other goats, and they are preparing for their new children, their new birth. And it is also that time when the Great Mother is nursing the baby, the infant sun god, bringing that sun back to its fullest. And that is when the springs and underground water begins to thaw, preparing to bring new life into the world. And then the cycle continues into March. March is our spring equinox and brings us Ostera, also sometimes known as Easter. That is a time of year when pagans celebrate this turning of the year, and the young god comes into its power. He comes into his fullness, and the goddess begins to rest. Oh man, y'all know. Teenagers start to get at least a little more independent, and maybe you can breathe again. And the goddess is resting and becomes the maiden and brings back rabbits and young animals, and the mating season begins and the world comes bouncing to life. It'll be here soon. Then Beltane comes with May Day. You see young girls dancing around maypoles, celebrating the explosion of flowers, the explosion of life. And the goddess is in full bloom in her majesty. She is powerful and beautiful and full of potential. And then we finally come to June 21st, the summer solstice, when the sun is in its power. The god is huge and powerful. The sun shines upon us, and we celebrate that warmth, that heat, and we tell stories on the longest day. But as with Yule and with Samhain, the veil is thin again between the worlds, but this time it is the summer tricksters who are about, and that's when we get all of that fun and excitement and unexpected joy. The year continues and cycles again, and we come to August 1st, the heat of summer. But this is Lammas, or Lugnasa, and the god who has been strongest at midsummer knows it is time to let go, and knows it is time to release this balance to the goddess who is strong and powerful and full of potential and fertility. And it is in this moment that we get our first harvest festival, and the god voluntarily dies. The god releases and lets go and begins to sacrifice himself so that the earth may yield the bounty that she has to offer. And the wise goddess oversees all of this. Then we come to September 21st, the autumn equinox, celebrating the full harvest. And we've been celebrating this since farming began. And we plant bulbs for the spring, putting in seeds of potential for the new year to come. And finally, we come back around to October 31st and Samhain again. The goddess is carrying the sleeping god again. She is in her fullness, awaiting this new birth, this new life. And the god's death has brought this beautiful harvest that sustains us through the dark winter and through that time when he is coming back to life. And the God that will be reborn rests until it is time. And this is how the cycle of the year continues over and over again, giving us hope that there is balance to the world, there is balance among all genders, that there is balance to the darkest of times. And so with that, we will continue our worship.
Ben and Jeff. Our reading for this morning is a last-minute change-up. I opted, instead of using the psalm, to go with a gospel passage, since I felt an additional surge of inspiration yesterday afternoon. Here now, a section from the Gospel according to Matthew, chapter 10, verses 16 through 22 and verse 27. This is from a section in which Jesus is addressing his 12 disciples, who he is deputizing, if you will, to go out into the world. He says, "See, I am sending you out like sheep into the midst of wolves. So be wise as serpents and innocent as doves. Beware of them, for they will hand you over to councils and flog you in their synagogues. And you will be dragged before governors and kings because of me as a testimony to them and the Gentiles. When they hand you over, do not worry about how you will speak or what you will say, for what you are to say will be given to you at the time. It is not for you to speak, but the Spirit of your Father speaking through you. So have no fear of them, for nothing is covered up that will not be uncovered, and nothing secret that will not become known. What I say to you in the dark, tell in the light, and what you have whispered, proclaim from the housetops." Here ends the reading. Thank you, Jeff. And thank you all for being here on this Sunday before All Hallows Eve, before Halloween. And just a reminder, there's plenty of Purell around. So don't be bashful with our gathering this day. Purell unto others as you would have them Purell unto you, as it were. May the Purell be with you. It's amazing to me, perhaps it shouldn't be since I spent 20 years in Salem, Massachusetts, that Halloween is increasingly a worldwide celebration of all things scary and terrifying. Although it's supposed to be lighthearted and fun, right? While the holiday has its origins in the ancient harvest festivals and celebrations of Northern Europe, as Sarah described, All Hallows Eve or Halloween that developed here in the 19th century as something distinctly American and secular, especially compared to the festivals of the dead in many Spanish-speaking countries, such as El Dios de los Muertos in Mexico. Has anyone ever been to the Day of the Dead in Mexico or somewhere else? It's pretty cool, huh? A little different. Well, I typically quite enjoy Halloween. As I said, I served the Church of the Salem Witch Trials for 20 years, and I miss some of that, although I do not miss October traffic. I do not miss October traffic on the North Shore. I find this year that I don't need anything else to foster my fears and anxieties. I don't know about you. I think perhaps many of us share the perspective right now here in the United States with the resurgence of the coronavirus around the country. On Friday, there were 87,000 new cases around the country, with a large concentration of folks testing positive in the upper Midwest, places that have disputed common sense public health measures. You know there is something to be scared about when both North and South Dakota combined have more cases than the entire state of New York, even though they comprise one-tenth of the population of the Empire State. It's estimated that by this coming week, we could set a new record with 100,000 cases in one day around the country, as the arrival of colder weather pushes many folks indoors. I know many reputable sources are saying this, but let me just reiterate since we're recording this, and it will be on YouTube and Vimeo, that the most ethical, the most thoughtful, the most moral measures you can take during a time like this is not to stand up for your liberty, but rather to wear a mask, to maintain 6 feet of distance from anyone but people who live in your house, to get a flu shot, and to avoid large crowds of more than 100 people, especially when they are indoors, and avoid massive motorcycle rallies that attract over 100,000 people to one small town in South Dakota. That is definitely contraindicated. Taking these steps and asking others to do the same is not an infringement on your rights. It's not some sort of insult to your God-given faith as an American. Rather, it is the decent and moral and right thing to do. It's sad that I have to say that, but since it's going to be on video, I feel like I should. I admit that I am scared because I see too many people rejecting these common sense recommendations, especially in regions of the country with the highest infection rates right now. And I am scared because we see the highest elected officials in our country encouraging disdain for these straightforward public health measures. Not only that, when well-respected infectious disease experts from the Centers for Disease Control attempt to recommend that people wear masks, our highest elected leaders dismiss their suggestions and call them idiots. This is one of those cases where truth is stranger than fiction and perhaps more tragic. According to the administration's own metrics and models, if everyone in the United States wore a mask starting today for the next 3 to 4 months, we would save approximately 110 to 115,000 lives in the next 12 months. And Halloween is the perfect time to promote such a measure, right? I mean, come on. wear a mask starting this week, and then just don't take it off. Don't take it off around other people until next March. It's not that hard. And not only are many of us scared about COVID's rates of infection around the country, we are scared. I am scared about that common sense measures are so easily dismissed and rejected and rebuffed by tens of millions of our fellow citizens. I am scared about what that might imply or say about different people's notions of what it means to be a citizen in a 21st century democracy. And I'm also scared about what this means for finding some common understanding about our situation. Why is some objective understanding of what is true so hard to agree upon? Why is it so hard to arrive at? It seems like the proliferation and the widespread use of social media networks. It seems like the polarization of our commercial media is making it harder to arrive at an objective understanding of our lives and worlds, instead of easier, even as we are swimming in more and more data and information. I therefore encourage us once again, all of us here today in the coming days and weeks, to be wary of announcements and messages that are posted on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and WeChat and these other platforms. There are groups out there looking to sow seeds of discord and confusion, make no mistake. This leads me to some of my other fears today, and I know I'm not alone. I am concerned about the very real reports that the Russian government and perhaps the Iranian government is actively trying to disrupt our election once again for the second time in 4 years. Excuse me, for the third time in 4 years, since they were active in 2018 as well. Agents for the Russian government and perhaps the Iranian government are posting incendiary messages and untruthful statements on websites that they have actually just created out of thin air and social media platforms. Just last night, have you received any of these? I received an email that upon a little research clearly arose out of Romania. And it asked me to click on this link that would take me to the truth about Dr. Anthony Fauci. That's actually quite remarkable. And it says something about the times in which we live in. Meanwhile, I should note the real Dr. Fauci now has to live and travel with Secret Service bodyguards, since he and his family have received multiple, not just a few, but multiple death threats over the last few months, simply for standing up and making recommendations on public health precautions. And I'm scared that there are conservative evangelical voices across this American landscape that are encouraging this sort of hostility to the American government and to experts like Dr. Fauci. I was reading a couple days ago about the Virginia-based televangelist Pat Robertson. Does anyone remember him, Pat Robertson, the 700 Club? I swear, every single babysitter I had growing up in South Carolina seemed to watch the 700 Club on TV. That's my association with it. And while I was reading about Pat Robertson this week, I was shocked actually that he's still out there hosting this program. I think he's in his early 90s. But Robertson is encouraging his millions of viewers to support, obviously, the candidacy of our current president, which is his right, in part because Robertson believes we are living during the last days before the second coming of Jesus Christ. And this televangelist has somehow come to the conclusion that this president is somehow ordained by God to be a part of this supernatural reckoning of the world. Good Lord! No No wonder more and more people under the age of 40 have stopped going to church. I must admit that I find it both concerning and terrifying that millions of evangelical Christians in this country have decided to back a man who exemplifies such remarkably unchristian behavior and who makes fun of them, who belittles them behind the scenes. Former Republican speechwriter and author and researcher Peter Weiner makes this very point in his cogent article about the state of American evangelicals and our current political situation. Weiner actually worked as a speechwriter for 3 Republican American presidents, including most recently George W. Bush. So he knows how previous administrations have operated. No one would ever accuse Peter Weiner of being a progressive. Even so, he opines about the ways that evangelical Christians are supporting a leader who has barely paid taxes over the last couple of years, who's declared bankruptcy 4 times, has been divorced 2 times, and has been reported to consort with certain film stars. Weiner states in his piece in The Atlantic, by overlooking and excusing the president's staggering array of personal and public corruptions, his evangelical supporters have forfeited the right to ever again argue that character counts in our country's political leaders. They might try, but if they do, they will be met with belly laughs. It's not that their argument is invalidated. It's that because of their glaring hypocrisy, they have sabotaged their credibility in making their arguments. I understand and respect that decent-minded people will have disagreements about politics and candidates and religion. I understand that decent people may vote for one candidate or the other this season. But I must admit, as a Unitarian Universalist minister, as an observer of American society and history, I am scared to think that millions of so-called Christians out there are willing to overlook the lies about the pandemic, the statements that have insulted our armed forces and veterans, the vilifying of immigrants and the demeaning of women, all so that they can achieve certain specific policy objectives, including maximizing the number of conservative-minded justices appointed to the federal bench. And speaking of that, I am scared that our country is about to appoint a judge to the Supreme Court who refused to answer a question during her nomination hearing about whether or not climate change is real, whether or not it is a growing threat. It is. I'm also concerned that she refused to say anything about protecting a women's right to choose. That scares me, especially since the science is so very clear when it comes to the causes and the solutions about our changing climate, and especially since all of us, I believe, should be in a position to make personal decisions about our own bodies. So let's face it, there's a lot to be scared about. There's a lot that could occupy our concerns. I don't need vampire and werewolf movies. I don't need an episode of Black Mirror. How many people know Black Mirror? I don't need an episode of Black Mirror to terrify me. All I need is the newspaper. The world can be a big and messy and sometimes scary place with dangers that are all too real and life-threatening. And perhaps our feelings and realizations about that wax and wane depending on the times in which we live. Halloween and the ancient traditions on which it is based act in some ways, in some respects, as a catharsis at times like this for our fears and our anxieties. Here at the end of the traditional growing season, as the air grows crisp and clear in the Northern Hemisphere, festivals and celebrations developed over the centuries that acknowledged the cyclical nature of our lives and our landscapes. Death and the impermanence of our lives was held up and remembered and even celebrated in an odd sort of way. This was the time of year when the final harvest was brought in, when some of our livestock animals were slaughtered, and when we turned our attention from the labor of the fields to the warmth of our hearths. For many cultures, this was also the end of the year. This was a time when our ancestors felt their mortality and the dread of the coming cold days and nights. You think we have seasonal affective disorder? Try enduring a winter in a cabin, in a drafty cabin or shelter with only a fire to tend to. This was a time when people needed inspiration and encouragement. And not surprisingly, this was then a time when people believed that the veil between this world and the next one was especially thin. And folks were invited to pray and to remember their dearly departed loved ones. All these themes and notions developed in Celtic and Gaelic culture and were certainly brought over, carried right on over by Irish immigrants to North America in the 18th and 19th centuries, who then inspired their uptight Puritan brethren and cousins who were already here to start observing this fun harvest autumnal event. And so if you mix 19th century American market forces here in the United States with Celtic celebrations and observances of the fall and of All Hallows Eve, you begin to understand how Halloween, American Halloween, emerged and developed. And perhaps it is good to be reminded of our fears and have ways to process our worries and anxieties. In a very real way, this is part of the role of a healthy religious faith in our lives, to support and inspire us as we confront the challenges and dangers in our lives, as we make choices that err on the side of growth rather than on the side of fear. After all, we all have fears about what might happen in our lives, in our world. What matters is how we manage those fears and how we deal with them. Do our anxieties lead us down a dark path in which we are tempted to blame others for our ills and potentially demonize people who are different and believe in crazy or out of this world sort of events and things? Or do our fears move us in the direction of recognizing our common vulnerability, our common humanity, and inspire us to think clearly and compassionately about how we can improve not just our own lives, not just our own souls, but the life of our community as well? We live between the mysterious intervals of birth and death, and we can bemoan our challenges and existence, or we can foster some appreciation for grace and all those things we enjoy but have done nothing to deserve. Father Richard Rohr points out in one of his meditations that ultimately each of us is the interpreter of our lives, of what we see, of what we fear, of what we desire, of what we react to in this life. That is one of the purposes of real and healthy religion in this life, to help us frame those perceptions and the ways we look at our life. It is our interpretation of an event or an encounter that prevails. Part of what a healthy religious life does is help us foster better outlooks and perspectives about our lives and the state of the world, especially when things get tough. Father Rohr observes, authentic spirituality is always seeking daily bread to feed the starving parts of our souls, and fresh and living water to fill our cup or our reservoir. He says both Jesus and the Buddha say the same thing. Stay awake. Watch the lens through which we are reading this moment. We all have preferred and practiced styles of attention. We must discover ours, or we will not see things as they are, but rather see things as we are. In some ways, those things that scare us can inspire us to find those things which bring us hope. Like you, I continue to have my fears and concerns during this highly unusual season in which we find ourselves. There is a lot of uncertainty and anxiety out there, but there are also opportunities to make a difference. There are opportunities to reach out to people and practice treating people with respect, even if you disagree. There are opportunities to promote following truth and observing science with respect to how each of us lives during a life-changing and dangerous pandemic. There are opportunities to remind ourselves and others that while many of the challenges we face can divide us, all of the solutions to our problems involve coming together, involve joining together, and respecting our mutual interdependence on one another and on this fragile, beautiful planet that we call home. While this is a scary time, it can also be a constructive time, especially if we feel we are part of a larger purpose and mission. The search for a viable vaccine reminds us that in order to save ourselves individually, we have to help everyone collectively. That almost sounds like something Jesus might have said. I have no doubt that the next few months could be very challenging and dispiriting. And I pray that all of us will remember the goodness that is within us and among us and cultivate that. Our fears can inspire hopeful actions in ways that can transform and enliven and heal. May it be so. Amen. I invite all of us to take a breath, peer up at the trees and the sky, at the sun trying to break through the clouds and give us a couple extra degrees of warmth. Take a breath in, and please join with me in this brief prayer. O God of such holiness as disturbs all easy contentment, of all frivolous self-seeking and all idolatrous claims of privilege, by your grace, scare and transform our gratitude into the courage to risk security for justice, that we and the human family no longer continue to unravel into the frivolity and hollowness of merely personal and private pursuits that can corrode our bonds of community. Oh God, make us bold, make us courageous enough to measure our lives not so much by victories won, by successes achieved, by portfolios maximized, but by worthy battles engaged, by good faith endured, by noble comrades joined. Help us to learn by heart the lessons of love that you bear on our hearts, until we wrestle from the depths of our souls your ways of love and the perspectives of laughter and your vision for the coming kingdom. Let the people say amen. As we continue to host these weekly services in person and virtually, we are thankful and actually quite pleased to see so many of you willing to continue to support First Parish Church. You can support First Parish these days, as I note, online on our videos by using our PayPal account, by sending us a check or dropping a check off or a donation off in our socially distant and hygienic offertory box posted on the table in the back, opposite the skeleton, or by going online and signing up, sending us a check virtually through your bank account, which is my preferred means. Regardless of the way you wish to support First Parish, we are grateful and thankful that you continue to remember our mission and our work. What we do here as a community, as members, really matters during a time like this. The morning offering will now be given and graciously received. Thank you all for coming today. We invite you to join us afterwards or following the service for some warm apple cider, which sounds pretty good right now. Some cider donuts. We are going to have ourselves a harvest fest of sorts and a trunk or treat. And you can see some of the cars in the parking lot that are already looking pretty scary indeed. That will happen after the service. There are most of our announcements are online or were included in the order service. Let me just note that we have our regular weekly Knitters and Stitchers group on Mondays, our regular Wednesday morning meditation program on Zoom, which is a great way to start the day or get a change in perspective during the week. Bristol Lodge, our Bristol Lodge group will be meeting this Wednesday, October 28th, to serve dinner. Next Sunday, we will go virtual once again, but we are inviting people to send in the names of dearly departed loved ones who you would like to remember in absence, as we light a candle for them as part of our All Souls candle lighting service. This includes dearly departed loved ones who passed away even more than a year ago. Several people have asked about that. If you'd like to have someone remembered who is no longer with us in this world, please, I invite you to give us a call this week or shoot us an email and add your loved one to the list for next Sunday. Finally, I just want to note a couple upcoming items in November. We have a book group on November 19th. We'll be reading Robert Reich's The Common Good. And I am starting up a weekly check-in and chat with the minister that will involve discussing a podcast that's described here on the back of your order service and online. It's called Seeing White, produced by the Center for American Documentary Studies at Duke University, as part of an ongoing conversation series we're having here in Weston and at First Parish Church. I think that is it for this day. I invite you, as you feel inclined, to stand up and join with me in our final hymn on this day. It's in your order of service. We are singing this hymn in celebration and in honor of Pope Francis's declaration and statement this week that all people, all couples, same-sex couples and different-sex couples, should be acknowledged and celebrated for their love and commitment to one another. Please join with me in Joyful, Joyful, We Adore Thee. Ben and Jeff. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord keep all those whom you love, whether here or in some other place. May God be your companion and you be God's friend as you walk together through all the days of your life. And at the journey's end, may you find the welcome of God's love. It keeps us all. Let the people say amen. And happy Halloween.
Amen.